Hello, and thank you for coming to our webinar today. I'm Carlos Bossy, the CEO of Datalere, and I have with me as our guest, Justin Waclawek, the CEO of Parkview Health Services. Most data architectures are designed for the organization as it exists today, but acquisitions test all the assumptions you've made in building that architecture. In this webinar, we're going to discuss a working system, not a reference architecture, that's helped Parkview Health Services go through a heavy growth and acquisition process. And we'll discuss how they've done it, and Justin will give us a lot of insight into that process. Let me do a quick introduction. I said I'm Carlos Bossy, the CEO of Datalere. Datalere is a data engineering, data architecture company. And my background is data engineering and data architecture. And we deliver solutions for our clients. Justin, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Justin Waclawek, and I am the Chief Operating Officer for Parkview Health Services. I am a licensed pharmacist, and as Carlos said, covering a pharmacy organization that has grown significantly over the last couple of years.
This is what we're going to cover today. Besides the introductions we just made, we're going to talk about Parkview and their business model. We're also going to talk a little bit about how we normally design systems and why the way we design them works and how it worked for Parkview. Then we'll go through some of the pain points they had, the data literacy issues, the architecture we built, and how they handled master data, and how they're scaling and what's next for them. Let me say a little bit about Datalere. Datalere is a company with a lot of experience building data solutions, and we work very closely with our client. We build systems for them, and the differentiator that we have is that we bring a lot of expertise in that area, and we have a process that works every time. We founded the company in 2004 and have grown it to be a very focused data solutions company. And last year, we merged with the Eckerson Group. The Eckerson Group was a leading data strategy, data governance, self-service strategy, and research company. And now we brought the strengths of both of our companies together. We like to partner with our clients. We like to work very closely with them. And we try to take things that are complex and make it simple. And we craft a solution for you that is the right solution based on your needs. Parkview Health Services, let me hand that over to Justin and have him introduce Parkview and tell you a little bit about what they've gone through the last few years.
Yeah, Parkview Health Services is a behavioral health specialty pharmacy. We service a variety of patients across group homes, mental health clinics, addiction service clinics, and other congregate care settings where the importance is adherence and access for our patients that are dealing with complex medication regimens. Currently, we operate 16 pharmacies that are located in 9 different states, but service patients through 14 different states, including the District of Columbia. As you can see on the slide, that's quite the growth from January of 2024 when we were about 5 pharmacies and only servicing 4 states. And part of that acquisition has brought new pharmacy management systems into our fold of pharmacies.
Hey, Justin, and let me follow up there a little bit because I'd like you to talk about the state of, we started working with Parkview at the end of 2023, basically at the start of 2024, doing engineering work for Parkview. Can you talk a little bit about what 2023 was like at Parkview? What's different now, but what direction were you heading in? Where were you? That sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. In 2023, we were mostly we were a New York State only based pharmacy is where we were located. We were operating 2 different pharmacy service platforms, and any of the reporting we were doing, we were relying on canned reports coming out of the system. And as you can expect, pharmacists who built these systems weren't necessarily accountants or sales reps, so they didn't quite have clean reporting, and there was no standardization between the 2 systems. So our team spent a lot of time trying to use canned reports and merge stuff together using Excel or other basic functions to help us understand where we were at. In 2023, we knew we were about to take a rapid growth model forward. And so we knew we had to get better at reading our data, understanding our data, and then making actions based on the data outputs. And that is why we decided that we needed to start to create our own data warehouse working with Datalere.
And did you, at that point in time in Parkview's journey, did you have certain questions you wanted to answer that you couldn't answer, or did you foresee that there were going to be questions about your data, about the organization, about the operation that or were you kind of open to the fact that we need to have better data and that was that?
I think at that time we had very much relied on gut feel for a lot of things, whether it be forecasting, reporting. We knew that we were good, we knew that we were growing, but we didn't necessarily have the proof in the pudding. So in order to, you know, relay to our investors and people who have backing in the stakes, we had to be able to prove out our statements. And that was what was the big differentiator. In order to make the commitment to invest in more pharmacies and more states, we had to prove that what we were doing was working. And so that was one of the main drivers of, hey, we need to actually get data that kind of shows what we're doing is what we're doing.
Okay, thanks for that. The next slide is, we'll get into the architecture for this and how it was built out and the next section at least. But what we really want to focus on here is how do you build a data architecture or how do you build a data foundation for growth and acquisition? And I've always told people I'm a big believer that if you build a strong architecture, as you grow, you don't need to go back and throw it away. You don't need to refactor. You don't need to swap things out. You can build on top of what you've done when you were smaller as you get bigger, if you do it right from the start. And again, we look at sometimes architecture is being built for what exists today, but we get into the mode of thinking, well, what will this architecture look like if the company was 10 times bigger or had 10 times as many companies as there is today in its and under its organization. So we'll get into that a little bit and talk about how Datalere approaches this. And I think what we like to say is we like to work right to left. So we like to go to somebody like Justin or his team and ask them, what do you need? What do you need to see? How do you need to see it? And that starts to inform the data models and the designs that we build. So often people start by looking at the source data, the data they have versus the data they want to see. And so by going in that direction, we engineer more or less an architect from at least the design of it works backwards in that sense. So when we start from the source system, it often feels productive. And it feels productive because you can begin immediately. You have data, there's things you can do, you can start pulling it, you can start transforming it, cleansing it. But in the end, you end up with often a data warehouse or a data lakehouse that nobody queries. And we see that a lot. So we're very consumer oriented in the sense that all the data should be set up for consumption. So when somebody like Justin needs data, he's able to get it. So when you talk to Datalere, that's our approach. And that's one of the keys, I think, to making this work, making systems like this work. On the next slide here, what we want to do is talk about the process, and then I'll talk to Justin about how this process worked at Parkview. We need to understand workflows, and we need to understand manual processes that are in place. What are the pain points, and trace the numbers. So, for example, trace a prescription from end to end, or how spreadsheets are currently being used, how varied data varies across pharmacies or clinics. And so we needed to understand this at Parkview to be able to move forward. So maybe I'll hand it over to Justin here. You can make some comments about about some of the problems or issues you had in this area and how you solved them. And just to kind of set the stage, I know there were issues with like claims reversals and well, how should they happen, or where do deliveries happen, and what's the right location for deliveries, which can be more complicated than it seems, to try to determine.
Yeah, for sure. I think initially when we had kind of identified the target outputs, like you said, we wanted to see, one of the first steps that Datalere did was really workflow chart our actual workflow. And it was interesting. It's the first time as a pharmacy we'd ever actually fully charted our own workflow from the pharmacy aspect. And then we did a second workflow charting on the financial aspects of pharmacy and how that functions and what steps are being taken where. And so we were doing a lot of stuff based on spreadsheets. And what questions came up as through the build out was that identifying there's all different kinds of state and zip codes when it comes to a script. There's where the doctor wrote it, there's where the patient lives, there's where their script ends up, where's what pharmacy filled it. And same thing with reversals and claims, how we build it, primary, secondary, tertiary payers, when things are reversed, when they're canceled, when you can identify that a prescription has actually been delivered out the door. So we had to spend time sitting in a room discussing what dates matter to us and which ones are the ones we need to use, whether it's for our sales team reporting or whether it's for our financial reporting. That was a whole process that we had to go through in discovery.
So it seems to me what you're discussing is kind of almost like a governance process. A lot of organizations have this problem, but don't do well with governance. There needs to be agreements on workflows, agreements on data, agreements on how data is used, what the right data set is, what the right number is, things like that. And I think this project more or less pushed you guys into that, whether it was informally or formally. And one thing I would ask you in this case is to get that done, who was in the room with you? Who did you get together from your organization to this? Because I think a lot of organizations struggle with that as well. They know they need to do it, but then who are the representatives? Who are the right people? Do they have the time to do it? Sometimes, nobody wants to sit there and talk about a zip code delivery address, right? When they're busy doing something else. So can you speak to that a little bit, the dynamics of the team that you put together for that?
Yeah, so two parts to that. The first part is in creating our workflows, actually people working in every step of the process were interviewed. We scheduled time to take them out of the workflow so they could actually sit and go through an interview process to explain their job, role functions, and how they do things. And then when it came down to the governance side, it was, a couple people from senior leadership, but we didn't just make the decisions based on what we thought. We brought people in the room who were the operational experts who were in the day-to-day business every day. Because something that the COO or the CEO may think is the right value, we find out later, well, actually, it's not because someone who's
Mhm.
working in the system day to day actually knows what this qualifies for. So it had to be a little combination of both because we had to have the decision on what makes sense on the business, but we also had to understand what makes sense in the operations and how things function on a day-to-day basis.
Mhm. And do you think the process that you took was it very collaborative? Was it, people kind of pitched in to work together? Was there a little bit of contention? They're just curious.
We got to a very good spot of everyone kicking in. In the beginning, there was definitely a little bit of tension sometimes in some of the discussions between sales, ops, and finance, which makes sense. Those are the three big branches, and they tend to have a little bit of tension here and there. But working through it, I think we all got to a page where we started to agree on stuff and collaborate. And so I think now we're in a really great spot where if something new pops up, we're very easy to call together the right people, talk through it, get to an answer as a team together.
Okay. Well, let me show on the next slide because it speaks a little bit to what you're talking about. And of course, the information on this slide, it's small and it's hard to read and it's not really meant to be read, but it's an example of what Justin was talking about, the understanding their own workflows. And early on in the process, after we had done a little bit of work building out a data mart or two for Parkview, I think they realized that, well, this needed to happen because even internally, they were uncertain as to how things worked. So this workflow laid out in detail a process that helped not just us as an organization helping them, it helped us understand what they were doing, but it actually helped them help Parkview internally understand. As Justin said, he wasn't sure what was really happening in some cases, and nobody really was all together, which is common in a lot of organizations as well. you want to speak to this a little bit, Justin, and how this type of work helped? I know you kind of briefly mentioned it a little bit.
Yeah, just like you said, it was really beneficial. We knew the general workflow, but sometimes there were steps or pieces that not everybody was aware of. And actually, the moment we got this first cut of the operations workflow back, one of the pain points called out, we looked at it and said, well, why are we doing that? And we made a shift before we even got our final first operations and changed something in our process to eliminate one of those pain points. So it was really, really beneficial for us as a team to take the time to chart the entire workflow in detail. And then selfishly, from my side as the operator, I got to turn around and show this to my sales team and say, here's all the steps that go into a day-to-day workflow, which to them was kind of a little bit of a jaw drop. They thought maybe we just slapped a label on a vial and sent it, put the big pill bottle in the little pill bottle and sent it out the door. So having this detailed explanation kind of helped everyone buy in, and our internal divisions of the company were able to actually understand each other a little bit more. So it was extremely beneficial to sit and do this process.
And what I would add to that is, this is something we don't do on every project, but it's also a suggestion of something that can be done if you're in the same position as Parkview was. In this case, a really helpful way, not only to understand your business process and your workflow, but also to ultimately understand what data is the right data, what are the right values to use, how to use them. If you understand this, then you get on the road to understanding that as well. Next thing I'm going to talk about here is data literacy, and the slide here mentions literacy as something that isn't really a deliverable in most cases, but it's often something that's not. I wouldn't even say it's cut. It's often not even considered as something that needs to happen. And sometimes the reason a good data lakehouse might go unused 6 months later. And I would characterize Parkview as a company that was not data literate, typically. And again, when I mean that, it's again a typical situation where much of the work is being done in the source applications that they've come to know and use use them well, or or in Excel spreadsheets, one or the other. A lot of work being done in files, in spreadsheet files, and a lot of work being done in the source applications, the pharmacy management systems and that sort of thing. But it wasn't an organization that understood what more it could do with data and how much further it could take it than how to use it otherwise. So this is something I'd like to spend a little bit of time on with you, Justin, as far as how data literacy, what you think data literacy was in 2023 at Parkview, and how it's progressed, and what you see, what changes you see, and that sort of thing, and what steps you take to help it to progress.
Yeah, I think we were pretty data illiterate back then. We knew it existed, we understood pharmacy, but we didn't really know all the data behind what built it. I mean, we're using pharmacy management softwares that have a UI interface, but we didn't really understand what went on behind the scenes to generate those. We knew what the steps were in what we saw, but we didn't know all the details. So going through this process has actually helped us learn more about the systems that we're using and understand them significantly better than we did before, which then helps us to become more efficient in the use of them. So I think we've come quite a long way from where we were, and then we're continuing to learn more and grow more. And then, the team that was working directly with Datalere on most of these projects has become extremely literate in the data. But now we're starting to expand that even further. So we're helping to educate people who aren't involved in the build out and are just using the exports, help them to kind of understand more and more about the process that goes into building it, what the different fields represent, what everything means, and then hopefully continue to build out solutions based off the data. The whole idea behind getting more data is to actually use it and not just have it sit in a warehouse. And so that's what we've really been focused on too, is make sure we make usable dashboards and usable KPIs and usable metrics. And those may change over time. So that's something that we're constantly kind of working on.
And so do you think data literacy happened at Parkview? There wasn't necessarily like an organized or a planned program, but it happened on the job, right? Essentially, it seems, for the most part. But you also talked about how your team has changed. And can you maybe give us a little more specifics about what your team looks like today versus what it looked like then as far as data is concerned, and what priorities, you see now?
Yeah, when we first started this build out, we had just hired our first own internal data analytics person, and then we had a bunch of people who kind of side of their desk job helped us try to understand, what data we were pulling out of the system. And since then, we have three full-time in-house data analysts, and then a bunch of other people who are using the data in different way. They have different role titles, but they're very involved in the data process. So we have six people who probably spend the majority of their time on our data. So it was pretty quick. We saw the ROI of the first person being dedicated to this, and so continue to add roles in it. And it's not going to stop either because the projects keep coming, the requests keep coming, and so we'll continue to build out that team from our end
Mhm.
and partner with Datalere so we can continue to expand what we have access to and what we're using.
Yeah. So it sounds like to me, even though maybe there wasn't a formal data literacy program, you somewhat covered that by hiring, right? You hired people that were more literate than people you had. They had data analyst backgrounds, right? Essentially.
Right. Yep.
So that was part of it. So people could learn on the job through them, but you hired people that, were maybe more savvy with using a data warehouse, a data lakehouse, and things like that, and building out metrics and measures on dashboards and that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's exactly what we did. I mean, I think the team that have been involved that didn't have the background have definitely learned a ton from working with Datalere just throughout the discovery process and between all the check-ins and you know rollouts of things. There's still sometimes when phrases are said to me and my jaw just kind of drops, my eyes get really big because I zone out because I don't know what they mean. But having now internal people that can actually understand that and have that very educated conversation. I will say this though, Daly, the team there has always done an awesome job of when I get that look on my face, they readjust and try to simplify. Okay, here's what we're saying in more layman's terms. So
But that's good to hear. Good to hear. So then now going backwards, right? You've started working with Datalere, you've mapped a workflow, built a data mart, you have some data analysts. Did you learn about things about your organization? Was there something in your organization in the workflow that you said, boy, nobody's responsible for that, or nobody knows that area? Is there any particular area that opened your eyes to that and you said, there's a big gap here and we need to fill it just by doing this work?
I think what we identified is that the some of the data we're using was wrong. So that was probably the biggest thing we identified. I don't know about any full scale holes, but we identified that like, hey, these reports we're pulling from the system, they're not right. And so we need to go back and fix and relearn them. It's definitely taken a lot of time off of our financial team with a lot of the spreadsheet and Excel editing that they used to have to do.
Mhm.
It was as bad as the one pharmacy system actually exports everything in PDF, and then we'd have to convert it to Excel. So having a data mart where it's all just available to us has been a huge help. So I think that's the biggest thing we identified. And as we've grown, we've had more uses for our data. And so I think had we not had a team, had we not built this out at the size we're at currently, we would have massive holes in our
Mhm.
organization of what we need to do on a day-to-day basis.
And then what about, this is a little bit more about the literacy side of it, but what about the new tooling and in this webinar, we're not going to talk much about the software, or the tools, but we introduced Snowflake, for example, as a data lakehouse solution. We utilized Power BI, I believe, for much of the dashboarding, and there were other new tools that were introduced. How did those new tools, how did they get adopted by the people at Parkview, and or was there resistance to them? Sometimes there is, I'm going to take your spreadsheet away and you're going to use this, right? And so talk a little bit about that journey.
We're still working through that in some instances. But yeah, that bringing our data analytics in-house, a couple people in-house has really helped to push people away from spreadsheets. It's always hard to take an Excel spreadsheet out of an accountant's hand. I'll tell you that. It's very difficult to do that. But as we've been able to prove the accuracy of what we've built, they become more and more comfortable with just using the tools, Snowflake and the Power BI outputs as the source of truth. We've actually gone away from using the software system as our solid gold. It is now the check. And typically when there's a discrepancy, the system reports are what's wrong. So it's really great to say that we've convinced people to use the tools that are out there. Our analytics team is using Snowflake more and more too, on just the back end before stuff gets into Power BI. We're using it for things I hadn't imagined in the past, for data feeds that we supply to different vendors, for different reporting and metrics that we have to use. We're using Power Apps now, that stuff that I never
Mm.
thought we would use, that all connect to the Snowflake backend to help make our lives a little easier.
And let me ask you this, how visible, besides your data analyst team, how visible is like, say, Snowflake at Parkview? Do most people still not even know it's there? Is it, or is it,
It, it's behind, yeah, no one knows it. Anyone who's not on our data team has no idea what Snowflake is or how it exists. But I think the reason is we've built great visual solutions by using the Microsoft tools, just because we were a Microsoft company,
yeah,
the Power BI and the Power App and the different forms. They don't need it. They can access everything they need from a more maybe user, maybe visible, friendly to
yeah.
non-data people
Yeah.
aspect.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, right? The data analysts, they're the ones who maybe want to get in there and query Snowflake themselves directly, and I don't know if that happens very often at Parkview. But yeah, if the end users are getting what they need through the dashboards, that's the best of all worlds, really. So that's good to hear. So now let's kind of go back to well, let me go to the next slide, I guess, because I'm stuck on this slide. This slide speaks a little bit about data modeling and how we go from the conceptual definition of a data model to the physical data model. This is an example of a star schema. A star schema is well known. It's always part of a data lakehouse solution, or if you're building a medallion architecture, it's always part of a medallion architecture, kind of a gold layer type of solution. But it shows on the left-hand side how you take the business definitions and turn them into a star schema. Somewhat used to be known as a bus matrix, and it's been expanded a little bit. But essentially, this is where we want to get to the point where we know how the data is going to be used by the end users, which Justin just described. So if the end users get a really good star schema or a really good dimensional model that's delivering data to them, they often don't need to go to the database directly or don't need to do their own analysis otherwise. What we see often is if these data models are not well built or properly developed, the users then end up kind of going around the system. They don't use the dashboards, don't use the reports. They maybe don't even use the data marts, or they try to use the data marts and get the right answers for themselves. So we're big proponents of delivering not only star schemas, but any other type of data model that the system needs. And typically it needs more than one. So that the consumers of the data get exactly what they want in the way they need it. Not everybody needs the data as a star schema either. And so there's more than one way. Some data might be in multiple data models and multiple delivery zones because of that. So that's one thing that I kind of want to go back to what Justin said, where he said there's end users that don't even know Snowflake is there. And the main reason for that is because the data models are, that proves the data models are good in my mind. And that's often how we try to judge that part of a project. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the zones that we built in data lake houses. These zones can vary client by client, project by project. We almost always have, I guess I would say we always have a raw, refined, and analytics zone. But in Parkview's case, they have six zones right now: a stage zone, a raw zone, refined zone, a validation zone, an analytics and reporting zone. And each of these zones has data modeled in a different way. And because they each have a different requirement for how the data is going to be used. And so the analytic zone is essentially a dimensional modeled data warehouse that lives within the data lake house. If you were working with a medallion architecture, which Databricks has pushed pretty hard, some of these zones would be in the gold layer, some of them would be in the silver layer, some of them in the raw layer. And to me, using the zone-based architecture is a great way to further define data within a gold layer or a silver layer or a bronze layer in that case. And we found that it works well, very well. We've been doing this for years, probably 8, 9 years following this type of process. And ultimately, for every client, we get to the point where they get what they need. I think for Parkview, the biggest thing here is that they bring on a new pharmacy because they're in an acquisition mode. And what we do is we take that pharmacy's data and we land it in the landing zones, whether it's the stage zone or the raw zone. And then from there, once the data starts moving through the process, gets refined and validated, by the time it gets to the analytic zone, we didn't have to change anything. The analytic zone can stay the same and the data can be analyzed immediately without developing a whole new data model because a new pharmacy came on. So it makes it a lot quicker to bring a pharmacy on, get the data up in front of Justin and his team, because we don't have to build all of this all the time. Once the foundation is built and we get the data in the right state in the raw zone or in the refined zone, then ultimately we don't have to do anything in validation or analytics or reporting zones. So I know I'm talking a little bit more on the technology side here in the design, Justin, but do you have anything to say here as far as like, do these zones mean anything to you? I know we talk about them a lot.
Yeah, they do, honestly. And one of the most important things, that validation zone, right? So when we do want to roll something up and or change something we're doing, sometimes you don't know how it's going to impact. So you make a change and then it turns out, oh, that actually wasn't the right one. So having it go through a validation phase is fantastic. And then as Carlos said, when we add new pharmacies and new systems, we don't have to go and rebuild our dashboards. We don't have to go and rebuild our KPIs because they're connected correctly by going through all these stages. And so typically, so far, hope it continues, they've all been very smooth when we bring new systems in. We can just roll it right up into our reporting. In fact, the CEO of the company on one of our most recent acquisitions, it was 10 days later, we had all of their data in and live. And he just couldn't believe it, how awesome it was that quick. When he asked me, what are we, like 45 days out, 60 days out? I was like, I think Friday we'll have it. He was extremely impressed. And so I think that just speaks to the building it correctly from the start allows you to
Yeah.
get your data faster.
Yeah, so that's the best referral you can give us, that somebody can acquire a company and in 10 days it's the data's all integrated in your architecture and in your delivery model so that sales are sales and products are products and everything just works. And I think 10 days would have been unheard of in the past, right? And it's unheard of to many people out there. I think people out there probably think you buy a new company and maybe 6 months later you have something that you cobble together. So I think it's one of the best things we can say about this process is it's so fast to get new pharmacies up on the system the way it's done. So talk a little bit about master data here. That's one of the keys to making this work well. We have a refined zone, and what we try to do in the refined zone is build master data tables. And that master data does matching based on a variety of different business roles, so that when we get data from one pharmacy and a different pharmacy, we're able to bring the data together there at that point in the process. And once we match it and we know that, a particular drug is the same as another drug, or a particular location is the same as another location, everything else further down the line just works. And so it's a really important step to take. You see over here on the right, the domains that we've mastered for Parkview, which would be different, right, in every industry. Again, these are custom solutions. We've mastered prescription sales, drug acquisition, claim details, and so on, manufacturer rebates, employee time tracking. So a number of things that come from different systems. Again, think of the model where you're buying a lot of different pharmacies or any other types of businesses. Employees are tracking their time differently everywhere, right? How do you bring that together and have the employee time tracking system from data from one pharmacy line up with another? Well, you do that in the refined zone, and we do that by building these master data tables. If that's built correctly, then everything down the line works really well. So, for example, what are some of the things that we've had to do in your case, Justin? I think maybe there might have been date of birth and name issues, maybe some of the issues with drugs or medications. Can you speak a little bit to this, is the importance of matching the data precisely from multiple sources, or the difficulties, or what kind of things you've done?
Yeah, you kind of hit the nail on the head there is that you think it's just very straightforward. Every drug should be the same drug, and if a patient's at one site, it should look the same as at other. But what you find is that when you're using different pharmacy management platforms, not only are things stored differently, but sometimes they're coded differently. And so finding a way to join the same NDC from three different systems to four different systems was actually more challenging than it sounded, and really important that link happens, because otherwise you're unable to pull any corporate-wide metrics or analytics if you don't have the way to tie these things together. Sales rep territories is a great example too. Being able to have a one master setup where everything then connects into it makes it that everything's standardized. So it's a lot easier for us to run analytics on things when we know that when we bring a new system in or a new pharmacy in, doesn't matter how they kind of had their stuff listed, we can point them to the right coding and have them
Mhm.
directed and have them linked appropriately.
Yeah, and I think, what happens is, to kind of follow up is, we have the master data in place, we have the zone-based architecture in place. So then now growth becomes just an onboarding exercise. You buy a new pharmacy, there's a process to get them onboarded, and it's done. It isn't a big unknown. It isn't a big, project that'll languish for a year and a half. There's a known way to bring on a new pharmacy. And now it just becomes a process where you onboard new pharmacies. And like you said, you can do it in 10 days in some cases. So now we've gone through the journey here and we're at a place where we have three times the pharmacies. We have two times the pharmacy management systems, but we've never rebuilt this data warehouse or data lake house, right? I'll use it, by the way, I'm using the terms interchangeably. I prefer now in the modern world to say data lake house because it's essentially what we have. But sometimes people call it the warehouse. And so here we are. We built a foundation because we focused on building a strong foundation. We haven't refactored it. We haven't thrown it away and started over. You build on top of it. You continue to build it, get it better, 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 richer. It's richer as it goes because it produces more, it does more. But in a lot of cases, if the key here is that we didn't have all the requirements at the start. The things we're working on for Parkview today, we didn't know in December of 2023 that we were going to do them. And yet we built a foundation that's able to manage that kind of work as well. So I think I can't stress enough how important it is to build that strong foundation. So when we talk about what held up, what was good about what we did, the foundation decision, the first requirement was really small. In fact, I'm going to say the first requirement to produce some data for you guys was about a 250 or 60-hour project, right? So by almost any scale at any company out there, that's a really small data analytics project. But it gave us the chance to build that foundation, to start working with it. And it's the same foundation we have today. We've just grown with that foundation, with those data models, with that zone-based architecture. The other way you could have gone with this, you could say, well, I just need a dashboard, right? I need data on a dashboard. And we see that a lot too. People produce a dashboard, but they have no foundation. And then, of course, later on, they're refactoring, rebuilding, starting over. So building a foundation is what made every request since then cheaper and faster. If we didn't have that foundation, we would have to start over every time. The initial project, I would call it even an MVP, a minimum viable product. But the good practices, the solid designs just allowed it to grow. Now, has anything changed since then? We have changed a few things. Today, we run our ingestion using Python because we were running up some bigger bills, I guess I would say, using Data Factory and other tools. What we decided to do is make Python the primary ingestion engine for us. It's not the transformation engine. We use an ETL tool for the transformation engine, but we found that Python would be a good way just to build out the staging and raw zones essentially that way. And then, architectures, any data architecture can be fluid and services can be replaced. Nothing is locked in. And so That's one thing we've been able to do. When the cost went high on something, we were able to swap it out for something else without rebuilding the whole architecture. That is one thing we will say about this project and maybe any other project. We like the cloud and we like pay-as-you-go pricing because you can often do the first project for a very small amount of money without committing to a large expense, whether it's your database, your ETL tools, your dashboarding tools, reporting tools, or anything else. But vendors can change pricing, and that's something that can, hurt you a little bit if you haven't grown to that level of pricing yet. So again, building a solid architecture often means that it's easier to swap a tool out, that you decided to go with a particular tool, a particular way of doing things. You switched it because the cost was not in the ballpark anymore, and you didn't have to refactor the whole architecture. So again, a little bit of a technical side of this, Justin, but any comments in this area from you?
I've heard Carlos and his team say so many times how important the foundation and the original build was. And I 100% agree. I think the first, as you talked about, the first project we had was extremely small. We were trying to get a solution for our sales data, and it probably could have been done really quickly. It probably could have been on someone's desk fast as a dashboard. But we took the time to, from convincing from Datalere, say, hey, you need to build this out. If you want to do more with this in the future, the right thing to do is to build this the right way. And it 1000% was an amazing decision because we've had asks, 25 different asks since then about different creations and different factors and different things to bring in. And it's all been a much simpler add-on process because that foundation is there and was built correctly from the start. And I can see how more frustrated I would have been if we had taken the really cheap, quick, easy way to start and then had to go back and restart from the beginning when we wanted to add a transactional layer like we did versus a
Mm.
sales layer. And so I'm on your team. You've got me fully on board now. How important that foundation is when you do your data build out. It's really really important.
Well, thanks, Justin. That's good to hear too. So, Justin, what's next for Parkview? This is yours. This is kind of yours to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, so I think our pharmacy is going to continue its heavy acquisition mode for the next 3 to 5 years. We're planning to move our way across the country. We're mostly on the East Coast right now, started to move into the central Midwest, and we'll continue to move all the way across, adding more pharmacies. And that may mean bringing in new pharmacy software systems for a time. Hopefully, we can transition people to be one of the ones we've already connected to. But it's nice to know that part of our integration and our M&A strategy, part of it is the data. It's a whole arm of our project. And so part of what we do is making sure we can integrate the data as well as the workflows and the people and the culture and all that stuff as well. Like I said, the way the lake house was built, that process goes a lot smoother than if it was the way it was done before. So I think we're going to continue. We're not at the end stage where we want to be with our data. We're still working on more. We're continuing to build out right now more workflow-based KPIs to really help our managers at each site be better managers of their team members. And so I would say we're about, 50% on the way of our data journey. And I hope it continues. I don't think it's something that's ever going to end because you constantly evolve. You want to stay on top of what's changing in your organization. So yeah, we're very
So,
excited for what's next.
so the strangest thing about this webinar is we've gone 45 minutes and we haven't said the word AI yet. And can you speak to that a little bit? Is AI in your future? Are you guys, I'm sure maybe on your desktop you're using AI. People, where are you within that journey as well? And not just, there's kind of a few aspects of just generally speaking, and then also the lake house and AI and, where you're headed potentially with things like that.
Yeah, me and Carlos have talked about AI a few months ago, and it's something that's on our radar for sure as an investment tool for us. We've just started using it a little more broadly across our organization in different departments, mostly on the finance team, a little bit on our sales team. We see it as a very valuable tool that can be used to eliminate a lot of monotonous things that some of our team members are doing. So we're definitely going to see AI come into our business a lot more. I think our as a company, we're going to make more of an investment in that through the end of 2026 and in 2027. Yeah, I do think it's something that's going to be extremely helpful in a lot of ways. It may even help with some of our people who are computer illiterate and are in struggle navigating even something as simple as a Power BI dashboard. Give them a very simple way to access what they're looking for.
Yeah, so do you think AI then will help bring them into the fold essentially, right? They give them a way or an interface to actually make better use of all this data as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the more people in our organization at the kind of manager level that are using the dashboards and the data can then also like not only are they going to use it to help themselves, but we're going to get better feedback as an organization. We're going to have more people who are contributing to the data and understanding it and making changes that can help us become more efficient. So I always am a big proponent of I want ideas from all the way down, any level, all the way up. And so the more people that are, using, if they use AI to understand or access data, they may have ideas on what we can change, what we can build out. So I see it be a huge value for our employees, but also for the organization overall.
Well, and I'm gonna go to the final slide here and we'll wrap up in a second, but I want to kind of give a closing comment, maybe ask you to give one too. But we talked a lot about the data foundation at Parkview, and we talked also about how they can do analytics, integration, dashboarding, reporting so much easier. But we didn't mention AI much for a reason, is because they needed to get to the place they are today, and jumping to AI before doing that would have been difficult. But where Parkview is today is we keep talking about good, strong data foundation, good, strong data models. They're in a position where they're very much prepped for AI, that now when they use AI, it'll work. As you hear, a lot of AI projects are failing. And again, mostly they fail because of the weak data foundation. If I don't understand the data, and I work with data every day, AI is not going to understand it either, right? And it'll do the wrong things, give you the wrong answers. So in closing, from my point of view, I'm going to say that the data foundation, it makes those dashboards and other things, analytics work really well, also makes AI work really well. What about you, Justin? Anything on your roadmap that you didn't mention? Any ways you talk about data that might be used at Parkview that we haven't talked, or any closing comments? I know you kind of covered a lot of that, so.
Yeah, no, I'll stress my agreement with you on the AI is it's only as good as the input you give it. So if you don't have something built correctly, it doesn't know what to do. You find that in every aspect of even just using something as simple as writing an email for you. If you don't give AI good input, it's going to give you bad output. So building that structure, we couldn't have turned on AI day one. We had to spend the time to understand our own data and build it out so that way we can now feed good information into it. So I'm very excited. I think this has been an awesome partnership for us. Datalere has been awesome with us through every step of what I would call our education and data. And I see them continuing with us in the future. And so I think it's important no matter where you think your organization is right now on a data understanding, there's probably always more, better, a further place to get to. And you want to find a partner who can help you, keep moving along that process.
Well, thanks a lot, Justin. I really want to thank you for your time. I know taking an hour out of your day is really, really difficult, knowing how much you've got going on, but really want to thank you for being on. I also want to tell people in the audience, we're always looking for people to join our webinar. If you've got a compelling topic you want to present, you want to be part of our webinar in some way, be a speaker, please feel free to reach out to us and we'll get you on. Thank you again, Justin, and good luck with everything in the future. And thank you very much out there. Join our webinar next time, and you'll get the recording for this one if you didn't catch it all. Thank you very much.
Thanks.